droughts, intensified hurricanes, disrupted rains, and biodiversity losses. Through our updated nationally determined contribution, Mexico will strengthen its renewable energy and sustainable transport goals, expand nature-based solutions such as the restoration of forests, mangroves, and coastal systems, prioritize community-centered adaptation, and include security as an across-the-board issue linked to climate action. We believe that a just energy transition should encompass the following 4 key principles: inclusion, job creation and skills development, investment in clean technologies, and support for communities. To advance towards sustainable and resilient food system, Mexico has implemented technical support actions through farmer field schools to increase production with an agroecological approach. We also established new seed banks dedicated to the preservation of traditional food systems, which contributed to the selection, conservation, and safeguarding of native corn varieties. Finally, the efficient use of water in food production is a strategic issue. Therefore, we implemented the National Irrigation Technology Program, which includes training and technological assistance to producers to recover volumes for other uses. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you indeed. We've now concluded the interventions by G20 members. We now have guest countries that have chosen to make interventions. As we have run out of time, we propose that we allow interventions right up till 6:45. And beyond 6:45, those who have not spoken will then be given the opportunity into the 3rd session tomorrow. We anticipate that we should be able to finish in time tomorrow. So if by 6:45 we have not given you the opportunity to speak, there will be ample opportunity for you to make your intervention tomorrow. We say this as we have some 500 guests who are coming in for the dinner, which we are all invited to, and we should not keep them waiting too long. But besides, we've been at this since 10 o'clock this morning, if not earlier, and I am told that it's always best to get time to rest and to have something to eat. This I get from my wife, who is a doctor, and I am a doctor by marriage. So this is the advice that I have received through my marriage. So I now want to call upon Dr. Netumbo Nandi Ndaitwa, and the guest country speakers have 3 minutes each.
Thank you. To address disaster risk, the African continent has renewed commitment by adopting the Windhoek Declaration on advancing the program of action for the implementation of this DIE framework for disaster risk reduction 2025-2030. As the cost of disaster increase and international assistance decline, more and urgent concrete action are needed in the next 5 years to sustain progress towards achieving the expected outcome of the goals of the Sudan framework by 2030. Our work on disaster risk reduction, climate change, and food security must be transformative. It also requires partnership built on accessible finance and fair technology transfer. Namibia is undertaking broad measures to transform our food system and reduce our dependence on import. Our focus is to reduce agricultural imports, strengthen domestic production, and build climate-resilient agriculture infrastructure with a strong focus on irrigation, water harvesting, storage, and the rural value chain. We are also modernizing our livestock sector, which remains the backbone of rural livelihood. On climate financing, Namibia will need 15 billion to meet her climate goals, with 90% of adaptation cost relies on international support, hence the need to scale up climate financing. Namibia is creating a formal and attractive framework for investment and technological transfer in renewable energy, including green energy value chain. Our goal is to build a full investable ecosystem while calling for a just transformation to allow development countries to space to develop under the principle of common but differentiated responsibility. We therefore urge the G20 to view Namibia as a vital strategic investment partner ready to work on our shared decarbonization. Finally, Your Excellency, as a country which is highly impacted by climate change due to our geographical location, Namibia is bidding to host one of the 2 African regional hubs for the Green Climate Fund, and we will appreciate your support. Thank you, Your Excellencies.
Thank you, President Nandine Ndaitwah. I now want to call upon His Excellency Dr. Julius Maada Bio, the President of the Republic of Sierra Leone and Chairperson of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS. In his current absence, due to, I'm sure, bilaterals, I'd now like to call His Excellency, the Taoiseach of Ireland, Mr. Michael Martin.
Thank you very much indeed, President. And again, thank you and South Africa for bringing the G20's focus onto global resilience. And as has been said by other speakers, disasters are increasing in frequency and volatility, heightened by climate change and conflict, and strong multilateral commitments are needed and are more important than ever. Ireland welcomes the Ministerial Declaration on Disaster Risk Reduction and the overarching approach to identifying, reducing and managing risks before they lead to disasters. On climate, some of us recently returned from COP30 in Brazil, and I was concerned that the spirit of common purpose is weakening. We have made some progress, but we now need to act with unity and with much more urgency. And indeed, the discussions there are proving difficult as we speak to achieve consensus. International climate finance is a priority for Ireland, and we are on track to deliver our COP26 pledge of at least 225 million per year to developing countries by 2025. We will achieve that this year. Our focus is on the poorest and most vulnerable, especially those living in least developed countries and small island developing states, fragile states and communities. Adaptation is perhaps something we haven't given enough attention to. It is central and equally adequate and accessible climate finance is key to countries' adaptation endeavors, and we need to improve that access. In the European Union, as Antonio has said, our sights are on reducing collective emissions by 90% by 2040. In Ireland now, emissions are now lower than at any point since 1990, despite our population growing by 50% over that time period and having successive economic growth as well. On just energy transitions, Ireland is committed to ensure that no one is left behind. We are seeking to, again, as others have said, maximize employment opportunities, support persons and communities who may be negatively affected, and some will, as we action a climate-neutral society by 2050. On food systems, the world is significantly behind on achieving Sustainable Development Goal 2. Transformation must be at the heart of our work to reinvigorate the 2030 agenda. Our collective commitments will be extremely important in the context of growing instability and economic and environmental crises. Ireland focuses on gender equality, climate action, and fragility through a range of partners, including the Food and Agriculture Organization, the World Food Programme, and the International Fund for Agricultural Development. Women's economic empowerment in the agri-food sector, improving access to finance, expansion of climate-resilient agriculture, practices, and policy engagement are all critical channels for achieving gender equality. Ireland has provided funding to the African Union for the implementation of the new Comprehensive African Agriculture Development Programme. In Africa and beyond, Ireland remains committed to supporting inclusive, climate-resilient, healthy and nutritious food systems and to contributing to all of these sustainable development goals. These efforts and the efforts of the G20 are integral to building a more resilient world. Thank you very much, President.
Thank you. Thank you, Taoiseach Martin. I now ask His Excellency Mr. Sifi Grieb, the Prime Minister of the People's Democratic Republic of Algeria.
Thank you, Mr. President. شكرا فخامة الرئيس سيريل رامافوسا. اسمحوا لي أن أتلو على مسامعكم كلمة رئيس الجمهورية السيد عبد المجيد تبون التي يوجهها لهذه الجلسة، وهذا نصها. تعتبر الجزائر إحدى الدول الأكثر عرضة للآثار السلبية لتغير المناخ، حيث شهدت في الآونة الأخيرة تزايدا غير مسبوق للعديد من الظواهر التي تتسبب في خسائر بشرية ومادية جسيمة، فضلا عن التأثير على النظم البيئية المختلفة. واستجابة لهذا الواقع، وضعت بلادي ترسانة قانونية ومؤسساتية للحماية من المخاطر الكبرى وتسيير الكوارث، بهدف تدعيم المنشآت التحتية وتعزيز القدرات التقنية والتكنولوجية، وإقامة وتحسين أنظمة الإنذار المبكر، فضلا عن تعبئة موارد مالية معتبرة للتكفل بالمتضررين. وعلى الصعيد الإقليمي والقاري، بادرت الجزائر بإنشاء آلية إفريقية للوقاية من أخطار الكوارث، كما تحتضن المركز العربي للوقاية من أخطار الزلازل والكوارث الطبيعية الأخرى، في مساهمة منها لتعزيز العمل المشترك في هذا المجال. السيد الرئيس، إن تحقيق الاكتفاء الذاتي وتعزيز الأمن الغذائي يشكلان أولوية للجزائر، التي تعرف خلال السنوات الأخيرة نمواً استثنائياً للاستثمار الفلاحي، خاصة في الجنوب الجزائري، عبر شراكات مع دول شقيقة وصديقة. ومن هذا المنطلق ندعو دول المجموعة العشرين إلى عقد شراكات مع الدول الإفريقية لتطوير الإنتاج الفلاحي والحيواني والحد من ظاهرة الجوع والأزمات الغذائية. السيد الرئيس، تواجه القارة الإفريقية تحديات معتبرة بخصوص الانتقال الطاقوي، إذ أنها تأوي 18% من سكان العالم، بينما تسجل أقل من 6% من الاستهلاك الطاقوي العالمي، في حين لا تتجاوز نسبة الربط بالكهرباء 45%. وبالمقابل يفرض علينا التصدي لظاهرة تغير المناخ، التخفيف المكثف للانبعاثات، وخلق ظروف مواتية لضمان الانتقال السلس إلى أنماط إنتاج واستهلاك خالية من الكربون، مع مراعاة المبادئ الآتية: أولاً، إرساء آليات تسهيلية تسمح للدول النامية بالاستفادة من الدعم المالي الدولي ونقل التكنولوجيا. ثانياً، تبادل الخبرات الناجحة في تطوير الطاقات المتجددة وترشيد استهلاك الطاقة. تعزيز القدرات البشرية والمؤسساتية للدول النامية. وفي هذا الصدد تدعو الجزائر إلى عقد شراكات في مجال التحول الطاقوي في القارة الإفريقية، قصد تجسيد تحول ناجح يسمح بتحقيق أهداف التنمية المتعلقة بالطاقة النظيفة والمتاحة والعمل اللائق والنمو الاقتصادي والعمل من أجل المناخ. وتبدي الجزائر استعدادها لمشاركة تجربتها في مجال الطاقة مع البلدان الإفريقية ودول مجموعة العشرين، كما تجدد التزامها بالعمل بشكل حثيث لتجسيد مشاريع طموحة مع شركائها بغية تعزيز الطاقة الخضراء النظيفة والمساهمة في الجهد الجماعي لضمان انتقال طاقوي سلس. وشكرا على حسن الإصغاء.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I now call upon Dr. Andrew Michael Holness, the Prime Minister of Jamaica and the Chair of the Caribbean Community, CARICOM.
Thank you, President. In the first session, I mentioned the recent passage of Hurricane Melissa, one of the most powerful hurricanes recorded in the Atlantic. The true economic impact will take months to fully quantify. However, preliminary estimates already indicate catastrophic losses. Prime Minister Carney pointed out that it is estimated that we have lost, in terms of physical damage, approximately $8.8 billion, or approximately 41%
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Once again, our condolences and our support to the people of Jamaica and the terrible disaster that befell them. And we will forever be holding you in our thoughts and continuing to give support. I now call upon His Excellency Dr. Mustafa Medboli, the Prime Minister of the Arab Republic of Egypt.
Thank you, President Ramaphosa, and let me start by saying that the world is being confronted with multiple critical and interlinked crises that threaten decades of progress towards the SDGs. Today, global challenges ranging from geopolitical tensions, climate change, and food insecurity to water scarcity, soaring debt levels, demand urgent and coordinated multilateral action guided by the principles of solidarity, cooperation, and shared responsibility. The G20 could play a leading role in advancing the response to the above-mentioned crisis. Access to concessional finance, technology transfer, and capacity building are crucial for developing countries to achieve climate action and just transition. The Egyptian presidency of COP27 has exerted all efforts to achieve tangible progress in all areas of climate action, particularly regarding just transition, the role of multilateral development banks in financing climate action, and above all, the establishment of the Loss and Damage Fund. We call on the G20 to take a leading role to improve the MDB's role in financing climate action and increasing their support and blending capacities to allow developing countries to have access to concessional finance and other non-debt instruments, and to unlock investment opportunities for a just transition. We also call on the G20 to encourage developed countries to fulfill their climate finance and ODA commitments. Furthermore, the growing global food insecurity remain among the most pressing challenges of our time. Egypt has taken significant steps nationally and internationally to address these critical challenges. In September 25, Egypt, in cooperation with the South African G20 presidency, hosted the third G20 Food Security Task Force meeting in Cairo with the aim to strengthening international cooperation in this field and alleviating food insecurity in developing countries. In conclusion, we believe that the G20 is well positioned to coordinate actionable measures to enhance finance for development, narrow digital divide, and assist developing countries to embrace new technologies, including AI, in order to tackle existing challenges and accelerate the implementation of SDGs by 2030. I thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Prime Minister. I now have the pleasure of asking Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Norway, Mr. Jonas Støre, to take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Norway has for a long time urged to have resilience on the global agenda, and I'm happy to see that the G20 summit under your chair, Mr. President, is doing precisely that. Belém, as my Irish colleague said, we were there 2 weeks ago, and although there are reasons to be very concerned about climate change, at least we can see and we saw there that the Paris Agreement is working. Had it not been for the Paris Agreement, we could have been at more than 4% temperature increase. Now we are at 2.5, that's too much, but it means that multilateral cooperation, having adapted mechanisms, can work. So we need to work and do that even better. And the world rightfully expects that the G20 can lead the way by setting that agenda. It implies climate finance, key to resilience. Norway has, for its part, doubled its climate funding. We were supposed to reach that goal by 2026. We are there now. And we still have our ODA at 1% of GDP. But the question is now, how do we invest our ODA? It is not the traditional mechanism that will work. It is if we work with the financial banks, with the development banks and the World Bank, we can move forward. On the energy transition, it is renewable that is now being the winner in terms of affordability. And that has now to be made available to people in development. 600 million people here in Africa lack access to the modern miracles from electrification, as well as clean cooking, taking lives of so many women and children. So to address this, we have over the last year worked to support Mission 300, the World Bank and African Development Bank-led initiative to provide electricity to 300 million people in Africa by 2030. So we welcome the early progress reported from this initiative, and we are ready to support it further. Let me mention a very different example, Mr. President, coming also out of Belém: tropical forests, indispensable for maintaining global biodiversity in Africa, in Latin America, in Amazonas, and in Asia, Indonesia. And the new Tropical Forest Forever facility, the TFFF, came out of a Brazilian COP. And I would like to commend President Lula and Brazil for having established this mechanism. Norway will contribute up to $3 billion over 10 years to support this mechanism, which is again an example of doing innovative things with our financial partners. Let me end on the third area, if I may. All G20 members are ocean nations, as we are, and Norway is in fact representing a country with the world's second largest coastline. The ocean offers many solutions to many issues on our G20 agenda, as long as the ocean is managed sustainably. As I work together with partners in the International Ocean Panel that I'm chairing with the President of Palau. And I'm happy to see that we have reference to that in the communiqué from this summit. We welcome the results of the third UN Ocean Conference in Nice, hosted by President Macron, the entry into the force of the BBNJ agreement, and the WTO agreement on fishery subsidies. So in closing, I would like to congratulate you, Mr. President, for also putting this theme on the agenda in a very appropriate way. And it will give, I think, impetus to the way we work on resilience around the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister Store. And now I would like to ask the Prime Minister of Malaysia and the Chair of the ASEAN Nations, Mr. Anwar bin Ibrahim, my brother. Please take the floor.
Thank you, President Cyril Ramaphosa. Southeast Asia is one of the world's disaster epicenters. In many years, our region accounts for around half of global disaster fatalities and more than $4 billion in economic losses. Not all these events are driven by climate change, but climate stress compounds their impact and weakens recovery. We have learned that resilience depends on anticipatory investment. That is why our region has built one of the most active disaster response systems in the developing world through the ASEAN Coordinating Center for Humanitarian Assistance, or AHA Center. The science of climate change is crystal clear, yet global momentum is faltering. In many societies, including the industrialized world, there is a rising pushback against policies seen to raise prices and threaten jobs. At the same time, energy demand in developing regions is growing faster than clean alternatives can be deployed. The world will continue to use fossil fuels for some time. Pretending otherwise will not help us plan responsibly. ASEAN's experience shows that regional platforms can advance climate action. Disaster cooperation and energy connectivity, even when global processes struggle. If fossil fuels cannot be eliminated overnight, then we need the technologies that reduce their footprint. CCUS, methane abatement, and industrial decarbonization will all be essential. Meanwhile, the ASEAN power grid and the Trans-ASEAN gas pipeline will help smooth the integration of renewables and strengthen energy security, even as we scale clean power. These are the kinds of measures that make the transition workable. We must accelerate adaptation where impacts already threaten lives and livelihoods, especially in food and water security. We must advance a climate strategy that is ambitious, yet grounded in the realities of our people face. To sustain these efforts at scale, international climate finance must be accessible, predictable, and aligned with the needs of developing regions. Only then can we secure livelihoods and advance shared prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. The last to speak on the guest country list is Lee Kinyanjui, Minister for Investment, Trade and Industry from Republic of Kenya, as chairperson of the East African Community.
Your Excellency, President Cyril Ramaphosa, President of the Republic of South Africa, Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, apologies, Mr. Ali Kenyajui, the Cabinet Secretary, is not allowed, and I am taking his place. I'm the Kenya High Commissioner to the Republic of South Africa. We wish to commend South Africa for ensuring that African priorities are prominently reflected in the summit's agenda, particularly on resilience, sustainability, and equitable development. Excellencies, we recognize G20's efforts to strengthen global disaster risk financing, which remains essential for enabling timely and effective responses to climate-related and natural hazards. We also welcome the G20 focus on expanding inclusive early warning systems and enhancing capacity building in developing regions, which is vital for protecting lives and preserving development gains. Excellencies, the East African community encourages G20 to advance the provision of predictable, adequate, and accessible climate finance with strong attention to adaptation as a pressing priority for vulnerable countries. We underline the importance of honoring existing finance commitments while pursuing innovative and fair mechanisms that align with the needs of developing countries. Excellencies, COMESA is leveraging continental initiatives such as the Mission 300, which targets electricity access for 300 million Africans through its Accelerating Sustainable and Clean Energy Access Transformation Program. Its regional component, the Regional Energy Access Acceleration Platform, provides tailored technical assistance, policy harmonization support, and capacity building to help countries advance scalable and sustainable energy transitions. We emphasize that energy development is inherently regional. Harmonized laws, coordinated regulations, and integrated markets are essential to avoid fragmented progress and to unlock economies of scale in cross-border energy trade and infrastructure development. As we advance sustainable energy transitions, we must ensure they are just and inclusive, fully supporting women, youth, and indigenous communities and workers in carbon-intensive sectors. Excellencies, let me conclude by saying we stand ready to deepen cooperation with all partners, including the G20, to accelerate clean energy access, strengthen regional integration, and build resilient systems that support long-term sustainable development. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We now move on to international organizations. And if we are economic with time, we could finish in a few minutes before we all retire to dinner and thereafter retire to have an early night. I now start off with the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Antonio Guterres.
Excellencies, the world has failed to keep temperatures to the 1.5 degree temperature rise limit, and about 80% of the world is sitting around this table. A temporary overshoot of this limit is now inevitable. Reaching the 1.5 degree limit is still possible by the end of the century, and that requires making this overshoot as small, short, and safe as possible. In any case, there will be dire consequences. More and worse heat waves, wildfires, floods, hurricanes, and hunger. Africa will pay a deadly price, despite doing very little to cause the problem. Avoiding more climate chaos means bridging the adaptation gap urgently as an essential element of climate justice. Developed countries must keep their promises, starting by doubling adaptation finance this year, and it is my firm belief that it is possible to triple adaptation finance by 2030 with the contribution of the multilateral development banks, as in COP29 in Baku. We must also safeguard the credibility of the Baku finance goals and capitalize the loss and damage fund, including innovative tools of finance. And in keeping with the ambitions of the United Nations Early Warnings for All initiative, we need to ensure everyone, everywhere, is protected by a life-saving alert system by 2027. We also need investments in resilience and technology to boost and protect food systems in the face of climate shocks and disasters. But all our efforts in adaptation will fall short unless we reach a drastic reduction of emissions in the next decade, going clearly beyond the present NDCs, which still lead to an increase of temperatures well beyond 2 degrees. And we need to supercharge the just transition away from fossil fuels to renewable energy, as described in the consensus of the Dubai in COP. Fortunately, the economics on our side. Last year, 90% of new power capacity came from renewables. Renewables are now the cheapest source of new electricity in nearly every country, and ensuring all countries benefit means providing financing and technology to help developing countries invest in grids, storage, and efficiency. And it means supporting workers and communities affected by the transition through training, protection, and new opportunities. All of these requires massive investment, debt relief, greater access to concessional finance, reform of the global financial system, all to give developing countries representation that reflects the realities of today's global economy. We need the G20 leadership and support as we build the resilient world people and planet require. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary General. Thank you for that input. I now call upon His Excellency, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Mohammed Ali Yusuf.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Excellencies, it is a great honor for me to present the African Union Commission remarks for Session 2 on behalf of His Excellency Mohammed Ali Yusuf, Chair of the Commission. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, for Africa, resilience is not aspiration but our daily reality. We therefore approach this topic with clarity. Resilience must be built on equity, investment, and justice. We applaud the South Africa G20 presidency for highlighting these matters in this G20 tenure. On disaster risk reduction, Africa has established the Africa Multi-Hazard Early Warning and Action System. It is strengthening national DRR strategies. Yet, only 40% of Africans are covered by multi-hazard early warning system, the lowest globally. We welcome, therefore, the G20 high-level voluntary principles for investing in DRR development under the South Africa G20 presidency. This will highlight anticipatory action, resilient infrastructure, and risk-sensitive investment. Our call is to translate these principles into financing aligned with African systems so that every African is protected by 2027 under the G20 Early Warnings for All initiative. In conclusion, Your Excellencies, a resilient world cannot be built without Africa. Our continental framework are ready, our political will is firm. What we require is a G20 partnership grounded in predictable financing, simplified access, and technology transfer, the one that respects Africa's development choices. It is time to move together from commitments to implementation and from principles to delivery. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I now ask His Excellency Dr. Carlo Monticelli, Governor of the Council of European Development Bank.
President Ramaphosa, leaders of the G20. Throughout history, the world has repeatedly faced periods of profound technological and societal change, periods that have shaken established systems. Time after time, it has been the most vulnerable who have shouldered a disproportionate share of the social, human, and economic burden that comes with such transitions. Present circumstances stand apart for two key reasons. First, the pace at which the change is unfolding and its fully global reach have no precedent. Second, there is a growing recognition that transition must be just. Safeguarding the most vulnerable is essential as it preserves social fabric that enables transformation themselves to happen. One transition in particular is taking center stage, the shift to sustainable economic systems driven by escalating natural hazards and deepening climate crisis. Multilateral development banks have scaled up their collective ambitions to support member countries in navigating this transition. Since 2019, MDBs have doubled support for adaptation investment, recognizing that well-being and jobs cannot be sustained where homes, schools, and business are under threat from flooding, drought, and other climate events. Solutions to respond to natural disasters are also developing. One example, in Seville, several MDBs joined the Debt Close Alliance, which, within this broader MDB ecosystem, the Council of Europe Development Bank plays a distinctive role as Europe's social bank. It advances a climate social nexus approach, focusing on investments that strengthen the climate resilience of most vulnerable populations and communities. Looking ahead to 2026, MDBs stand ready to support their clients through this period of profound global transformation, ensuring that people remain at the core of the solutions we deliver. Thank you.
Thank you indeed. I now want to call, as you see me hesitate, I just had a whisper in my ear from the Secretary General of the United Nations, who has just told me that the main decision of the COP30 has just been approved. So the Secretary General is understandably very happy. and I congratulated him. Thank you very much, Secretary General, for sharing. Thank you so much. I now call upon Andrew Bailey, the Chair of the Finance Stability Board. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Your Excellency. Let me be very brief. Sustainable growth requires long-term engagement and long-term finance. And in turn, that requires us to understand the risks to that finance over the longer term. Climate change is undoubtedly one such risk. But the answer to that is not to have no or less finance. It's to use finance to support the transition to a sustainable future. The FSB has a role to play in helping the system to assess risks, providing frameworks to do that, and thereby to support sustainable finance. And I can give the assurance that is what we will do. Thank you.
That was nice and sweet. Thank you. 45 seconds. Excellent. Can I ask Mr. Claver Gatete, Under-Secretary General of UNECA, of United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. Let's see if you will be able to beat that record.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I align myself with the statement by the Secretary General. Thank you so much.
Gee, we are on a roll. We are on a definite roll. Ms. Rebecca Gracepan Mayulfs, the Secretary General of UNCTAD.
I will have to do the same, Mr. President, and I align with the statement of the Secretary General of the UN.
Thank you so much. My next speaker is Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus. I am going to give you time because you deal with a different matter altogether. WHO.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Excellency, President Ramaphosa, Excellencies. WHO welcomes the G20's endorsement of health security and resilient health systems in the declaration and the voluntary high-level principles of investing in disaster risk reduction. Likewise, we welcome South African presidency's focus on critical infrastructure. Strong health systems and early warning capacities are vital for preventing crises from becoming disasters. The COVID-19 pandemic exposed critical gaps in the world's health security defenses. We thank the G20 for its leadership in closing those gaps, including through the establishment of the Pandemic Fund and the Joint Finance and Health Task Force. In addition, WHO has also launched several initiatives for global health security based on COVID lessons. And as you know, at the World Health Assembly this year, WHO member states adopted the WHO Pandemic Agreement, which, when ratified, will become a landmark instrument of international law. Member states are now negotiating the Pathogen Access and Benefit Sharing System, or the PABS Annex, which will be critical for ensuring equitable access to vaccines and other medical countermeasures. We ask G20 countries to ensure those negotiations are completed in time for next year's World Health Assembly in May, because the next pandemic is not a question of if, but when. I thank you, and back to you, Mr. President.
Thank you so much, Tedros. My last speaker is His Excellency Maximo Tirino Cullen from the Food Agriculture Organization.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I will try to be as brief as possible. In 2023, the world saw the steepest surge in food price inflation in decades. In low-income countries, food inflation reached 30%, pushing households' budget beyond their limits. This implies that the cost of a healthy diet rise substantially, making 2.4 billion people didn't have access to a healthy diet. Countries try to resolve this through different fiscal measures, social protection, and other measures. But Excellencies, the G20 can change this trajectory. Open, predictable food markets are essential, particularly for net food importing countries. We must also invest in resilience, as climate shocks will intensify in intensity and frequency. First, through prevention, anchored on early warning, risk analytics, insurance, and One Health approaches. And second, by increasing countries' ability to cope when shocks happen, with a strong social protection and science and innovative-driven agricultural transformation, and trade policies that keep food accessible during these stresses. FAO's Financing for Shock-Driven Food Crisis facility tried to mobilize countries and private capital to strengthen prevention and enable anticipatory action. Through targeted investments and the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty, we're trying to drive country-led agri-food system transformation at a scale to achieve this resilience. Excellencies, the world cannot wait. Leadership is needed now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'd like to extend my thanks and gratitude to you all. And by way of concluding this, we'd like to say as South Africa, the global community is faced by several formidable and related issues. And a number of them are poverty, unemployment, food insecurity, inequality, environmental degradation, and climate change. The complexity of these challenges does call for enhanced action. Resilience is not merely about recovery after a disaster or crisis. It is about foresight, shared responsibility, and sustainable development. A resilient world can only be achieved through inclusive economic growth, strengthening global partnerships, and reforming international institutions. It means we must be prepared. We must, as a matter of urgency, integrate disaster risk reduction into macroeconomic policies, climate financing, and sustainable infrastructure development. We must also ensure that vulnerable countries and communities have equitable access to technologies, to finance, and the capacity to anticipate and withstand future shocks. As we look ahead, South Africa believes that our collective efforts should focus on three imperatives. Firstly, we must strengthen global early warning systems. For many countries, this means scaling up of investments in data, in technology, and capacity to reach the most vulnerable communities that may be exposed to danger. Second, we must mobilize innovative finance for resilience. The G20 should champion accessible, practicable, and equitable disaster risk financing instruments. We need to pool risk, mobilize anticipatory funding, and forge public-private partnerships. And thirdly, we must mainstream disaster risk reduction into all sectors of economic planning, from energy and infrastructure to agriculture and urban development as well. Sustainable, balanced, and inclusive growth requires that we must take measures to address the severe imbalance in vulnerability to the increasing effects of climate change. Now, those countries most affected by severe weather events are often those that bear the least responsibility for climate change. This threatens to further deepen inequality between and within countries. Developing economies need resources and technical partnerships for effective adaptation. We need to make good on our commitments to fund loss and damage caused by climate change. And as 2025 marks the 10th anniversary of the Paris Agreement, we recognize its historic contribution to fostering universal climate action. And yet, global temperatures continue to climb. We have no choice but to fully effectively implement what we agreed to implement, and its temperature goal. In doing so, We must hold fast to the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. Just transition pathways are key enablers for climate action. These should encompass a whole of economy and a whole of society approach. In the face of persistent hunger and escalating climate pressures, we face a sobering reality. According to the Food and Agricultural Organization, as many as 700 million people are experiencing hunger worldwide. Excessive food price volatility continues to undermine purchasing power, especially for low-income communities. But we must applaud the G20 for continuously keeping food security at the center of the developmental agenda. South Africa made food security one of the priorities of its G20 presidency, building on the excellent work of previous presidencies, including the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty established under the Brazilian presidency. Platforms such as Agriculture Working Group, Meeting of Agricultural Chief Scientists, and the Food Security Task Force have delivered outcomes that underscore what we believe is the importance of building inclusive, diverse, and resilient, sustainable food systems. Since it was formed at a time of crisis, the G20 and the world has had to confront several crises. Unless we act now to build resilience and sustainability, the crises we face tomorrow will be more devastating, more damaging, and more lasting, as we have already heard from a number of speakers who stood to speak here. Now, that concludes our day today, and I think the day has gone extremely well, and we've finished more or less on time. We left with one session, which is tomorrow, the third session, which is really a short session, just a half-day session. We now have an opportunity to have dinner together and to relax and to let our hair down. Those who have long hair and me, let my hair up. So that we are able to mix and amongst each other and get to know each other rather well. We will now get an announcement of where we should go, and thereafter, that will be the end of the evening. We expect that this will just take 2 hours, and by 9 p.m. we should all be departing for the various places where we are going to rest. So thank you very much. Let's give ourselves a round of applause for the wonderful day we've spent.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we invite the heads of state and government
Morning, everyone. Morning, Minister. Thank you so much for making the time to join our summit here. It's a busy week for you, obviously. You're here with us today. You have the B20, you have the G20, not to mention your birthday, and the Kaiser Chiefs are playing twice this weekend, I saw. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of things, obviously there's some good news. The Standard & Poor's upgraded South Africa for the first time in 2 decades the other day. What's your takeaway? Is South Africa over the hump now? Is everything brilliant?
Yeah, thank you very much, and good morning to the audience. Indeed, we have turned the corner, not only the S&P, the lifting from the grey listing, FATF grey listing. In the network industries, we have defeated load shedding more than a year now without load shedding.